Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. The lights above me were too bright. Not like the ones in a bedroom or a hallway. These were sterile, clinical, buzzing faintly overhead as they wheeled my bed through the operating room doors. I could hear voices around me, calm but urgent. I couldn't make out what they were saying. Everything was muffled, like I was underwater. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was young, healthy mostly, a little tired lately but nothing serious. Then came the chest pain, the shortness of breath, the fainting spell in the kitchen that brought me here, face down on the floor, barely conscious as my husband dialed for help. They told me it was my heart, failing, fast. Surgery was scheduled the same day. I didn't have time to process it. No time to panic, to cry, to pray. Just machines. For lines. Scrubs. Beeping monitors. My husband held my hand for a moment before they took me in. Just a moment. No words. No kiss. His fingers were cold. Detached. He looked over my head when he told me I'd be fine. Like he already knew something I didn't. I was wheeled away while he stood still. Inside the OR, the voices grew clearer. Nurses double-checked tubes and machines. A surgeon leaned over me and said my name, said I was in good hands. I nodded, though my lips barely moved. The anesthesia kicked in. My limbs grew heavy. My chest felt hollow. Then came the darkness. I expected to sleep, to dream, but it wasn't like that. It was empty, weightless, soundless. And then I heard it. Not with my ears, with something deeper. A long flat tone. One long note stretched endlessly, vibrating through whatever part of me was still aware. Someone shouted my name. Another voice barked. She's coding. My heart had stopped. On the table. Just like that. I wanted to fight. To reach for something. For anyone. But there was no more body to move. No voice to scream with. Just the faint knowing that this was it. This was how I died. And just before it all slipped away, I felt one last thing. Not fear. Not pain. Just the strange thought that maybe this was supposed to happen. Maybe I wasn't the ending to a story. Maybe I was the beginning of someone else's. When I opened my eyes, I didn't recognize the ceiling. It was white. Smooth. The kind of white that looked expensive. I blinked a few times, trying to place the shapes, the lights, the faint humming machines. Everything felt thick, like I was waking up underwater. And then came the pain. A heavy pressure in my chest, deep and sore, like something had been ripped out and stitched back in. I tried to move, but my arms wouldn't respond. My fingers twitched weakly against the blanket. Tubes ran from both sides of my body. I could hear the beeping of my heart, slow but steady. Someone leaned over me. A nurse. Her eyes softened when she saw me awake. "Welcome back," she whispered. I wanted to speak, but my throat burned. She placed a straw between my lips and helped me sip. The water tasted like metal. "You're in recovery," she said. "You made it." I didn't remember the surgery. I barely remembered getting to the hospital. Only fragments: my boyfriend's voice on the phone, the flashing lights in the ambulance, the way the nurses rushed around me. They told me I was lucky, that my condition was severe, that I'd been dying for months and didn't even know it. But someone saved me. A donor. A match. That's all they said. The heart came just in time. An anonymous gift. I asked for my boyfriend. She nodded and stepped out. A few minutes later, he came in. Tears filled his eyes before he said a word. He looked at me like I was a miracle. Like I was a ghost returned from the dead. He sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand, shaking. "You're here," he whispered. "You're really here." I smiled weakly. Everything inside me still hurt. But I could feel it, the rhythm, the strength. My heart was beating. And it wasn't mine. It belonged to someone else. Someone I'd never met. Someone who gave up everything so I could keep going. My boyfriend brushed the hair from my forehead. "You have no idea how scared I was," he said. "When they said you needed a heart, I thought I was going to lose you." He pressed his forehead to my hand and just sat there, crying. I wanted to ask who it came from. I wanted to know the name, the story, the face. But I couldn't find the words yet. All I knew was this: someone had died. And I was the reason they didn't go home. It rained the day we buried her. Not the kind of rain that drenches everything. Just a quiet, steady drizzle. like the sky knew something had ended, but didn't want to make a scene about it. The kind of rain that whispers instead of shouts. Her mother stood under a black umbrella, clutching a folded tissue in one hand and a photograph in the other. Her face was still too still, like she hadn't yet allowed herself to collapse. Her sister wept quietly beside her, trying to hold herself together. A few cousins, a neighbor or two, a total of maybe 14 people. Everyone kept asking the same question: where was he? The husband, the man who'd held her hand through 2 surgeries, the one who once called her the love of his life, the man who, just a week earlier, had sat in a hospital waiting room while she was being prepped for what would be her final surgery. He never came. Not to the funeral. Not to the wake. Not even to her mother's house afterward. He didn't send flowers. He didn't write a message. He didn't return a single call. He disappeared. At first, people made excuses for him. Grief is strange, someone whispered. Maybe he's not ready. But by the end of the service, that turned into something colder. Maybe he's not who we thought he was. Her mother tried to believe the best. Said he was probably lost in his own pain. But even she couldn't ignore the silence. His absence was too loud, too deliberate. They lowered the casket as the priest read softly from a rain-smudged card. Her name, her date of birth, her favorite scripture. The last line of the prayer was followed by nothing. No eulogy from him.
No final goodbye.
Not even a look back. Just the sound of the rain tapping on umbrellas, and the quiet ache of a woman gone too soon. The box sat untouched in her closet for almost 2 weeks after the funeral. Her mother didn't want to open it. Said it felt wrong, like reading the last private pages of someone who couldn't stop you anymore. But the house was too quiet, and the ache of not knowing was heavier than the guilt. Inside were notebooks. Dozens. Some half-filled, others bursting with scribbles, pressed flowers, notes tucked between pages. She had always written. Even as a kid. It was how she made sense of the world. Her mother used to call them thought boxes. One journal stood out. Smaller. Black cover. Newer pages. The last one. Her handwriting had changed, messier, rushed. Like she wrote most of it lying down, tired or in pain. The first few pages were normal. Grocery lists. Dreams she had. Plans for a weekend that never came. Then something different. He's distant again. Always on his phone. Always smiling at texts I never get to see. He says I'm imagining it. That it's the stress. But I know what it looks like when someone's pulling away. Last night I asked him if he still loves me. He kissed my forehead and said, "Don't be dramatic." Then he rolled over and fell asleep. Her mother's hands trembled as she flipped the pages. I found lipstick on his collar yesterday. Not mine. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm making things worse than they are. But sometimes when he looks at me, it feels like he's already gone. The words weren't angry. They weren't even sad. They were quiet. Exhausted. Like she had already grieved the end of her marriage long before her body gave out. I keep thinking, what if something happens to me and I die never knowing the truth? Would he cry? Would he care? Would he even come to my funeral? Her mother closed the journal. And for the first time since the hospital call, she let herself cry. Not because her daughter was gone, but because she had died thinking love was supposed to feel like waiting. She wasn't looking for him. She was only there to drop off a card. A small gesture. A handwritten note for the transplant team, thanking them for what they did. For trying to save her best friend, even though it didn't work. She hadn't expected the walk through that wing to feel so heavy. The antiseptic smell. The beeping monitors. The exact hallway where they wheeled her friend down the day of the surgery. She almost turned back. But then she saw him. At first she thought it was someone who looked like him. Same posture, same haircut. Leaning forward in a chair outside a recovery room, elbows on his knees like he was holding his breath. His face was softer than she remembered. Nervous. Focused. He stood up and walked to the bedside. She took one step closer, slowly, quietly, and what she saw made her freeze. There was a woman in the bed. Pale, recovering, with wires running from her chest and an oxygen tube resting just below her nose. She looked young. Too young to be this sick. But she was smiling at him. And he was holding her hand. Not like a stranger. Not like a friend, like someone who had nearly lost her. Like someone whose world had cracked open and was now being stitched back together. She watched him brush a strand of hair from the woman's face. Then he leaned in and kissed her forehead. Her heart stopped. He wasn't mourning. He wasn't broken. He was here, in this hospital just days after his wife had died in this very building, holding another woman like she was his whole world. And that's when the pieces began to click. Why he hadn't called. Why he hadn't come to the funeral. Why he'd vanished. He hadn't disappeared out of grief. He had been here all along. She couldn't stop shaking. Not in rage. Not in grief. In disbelief. That kind of deep, bone-chilling disbelief where the body goes cold even though the blood is boiling. She stood frozen in the hallway, just far enough not to be noticed, but close enough to see everything she needed to. He hadn't even looked sad. The man who was supposed to be shattered had already moved on. She left the hospital in silence, walked straight to the nearest bench and sat down hard. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. Her friend, her best friend, was gone. And he was inside, living like none of it ever mattered. There was one thing she needed now. One answer. Just one name. She waited until the next morning and walked back through the hospital doors, this time with purpose. She asked to speak to someone from the transplant coordination team. Said she wanted to leave a thank you for the recipient family. She used her friend's name, the date of the surgery, the details only someone close would know. The woman at the desk was polite, calm, until she asked who received the heart. "I'm sorry," the woman said. "That information is confidential." But something in her expression shifted, a flicker of hesitation. So she asked a different question. Was the heart given to a woman? Mid-20s? Same hospital. The coordinator didn't respond right away. Just tapped her fingers nervously, then glanced away. "Why do you ask?" She took a deep breath. "Because I saw him. Her husband. In recovery. Holding someone else." That was when the nurse's face changed completely. She knew. And she didn't have to say it. Still, the words came out in a whisper. The recipient was in critical condition. She got the heart just in time. A pause. She wasn't his wife, was she? Another pause. Then very quietly.
No.
There it was. The truth. His lover had received his wife's heart. The woman he left his dying wife for. The woman he'd been hiding, texting, kissing behind closed doors, was alive now, because of the woman he abandoned. And he didn't even know it. He looked confused when she showed up at his door. No warning. No small talk. Just her standing there, holding a folded sheet of paper, her eyes hollow, her jaw clenched like she'd rehearsed this confrontation in her head 100 times. "I know who the heart came from," she said. He blinked. "What are you talking about?" She stepped inside without waiting for permission, walked right past him into the living room, sat down on the couch like she'd been there 1,000 times, which, in truth, she probably had. She unfolded the paper. It was a printed copy of the hospital's acknowledgement letter. Sanitized language. No names. But the dates matched. The surgical team matched. And the timing was exact. She didn't hand it to him. She just held it between them. "The woman who died that night," she said. "The one who saved me." He didn't move. "Do you want to know who it was?" she asked. He swallowed hard. "That's confidential. She was your wife." The silence stretched. He stared at her like he hadn't heard the words right, like his brain was trying to rearrange them into something that made sense. But they didn't change. They just hung there. Heavy. Final. "What?" he whispered. "She was the donor," she said. "The heart that's keeping me alive. It was hers." His face collapsed. He sat down slowly like his legs couldn't hold him up anymore. His hands pressed against his mouth. For a long time he didn't say anything. Just breathed. Shallow. Panicked. Broken. "I didn't know," he finally said. "I didn't. I thought she was stable. I didn't think she was that bad." "You weren't there," she said. "You didn't want to be." He looked at her, and in that moment all the guilt he had avoided came crashing through. He wasn't a man who lost his wife. He was a man who ignored her, betrayed her, and then, without knowing, gave the woman he cheated with the very thing that made his wife human. Her heart. His voice cracked. I can't, how do I live with that? She didn't answer. Because there wasn't an answer. There was only the sound of his breathing and the truth echoing through the space between them. Started with a dream. She was walking through a field she didn't recognize. Tall grass, warm sun, a breeze that smelled like jasmine. There was laughter in the distance. A child's voice calling someone's name she couldn't quite hear. And then a woman's hand, just the hand, reaching out in front of her, pointing to the sky. When she woke up, her heart was pounding. But it wasn't fear. It was grief. And she didn't know why. The second time it happened, she was in the kitchen, making tea. She reached for the wrong mug. A yellow one with a chipped handle she didn't even remember owning. The moment her fingers wrapped around it, she felt something sharp in her chest. Not pain, memory. A flash of a couch. A book left open. A laugh that didn't belong to her voice. That's when she started writing it all down. Every strange feeling. Every moment that didn't belong to her. She told herself it was the medication. Recovery fog. Post-surgery dreams. But it didn't stop. The next dream was worse. More vivid. She stood in front of a mirror looking at herself. Except the reflection wasn't quite right. Same hair. Same eyes. But the sadness, it was deeper. Heavier. Like it had been living there for years. And then the voice came. Soft. Gentle. Tired. Please don't waste it. She woke up sobbing. She had no reason to cry. No memory to mourn. But it felt real. Too real. She picked up a pencil and started to sketch. Something she hadn't done since she was a kid. Her hand moved without thought. First a shape. Then a face. A woman's face. She didn't recognize it. But it felt familiar. She showed it to him. His face went pale. Where did you see her? He asked. I didn't, she said. She came to me. In a dream. He stared at the drawing like it was a ghost. And then he whispered her name. His wife's name. The woman whose heart now beat inside her chest. She waited until he came home. The sketch lay on the kitchen table. The lines were darker now, as if she'd redrawn the face over and over again, trying to bring something into focus. A face she'd never seen in life, but one that lived quietly in the shadows of her dreams. He froze the moment he saw it. His keys slipped from his hand and hit the floor. Her name, she said, was Emily. He looked up sharply. Who told you that? No one. His mouth opened, then closed again. The lie didn't even try to form this time. I remember her, she said. Not as me. Not in my mind. But, in my body. There are pieces of her everywhere. He sat down slowly, like he already knew he wasn't getting back up from this. I feel things that aren't mine, she continued. Smells. Sounds. A song I've never heard but somehow already know the words to. And you, when you touch me, sometimes I flinch. Not because I'm scared, but because I feel her disappointment. He buried his face in his hands. I didn't mean for any of this to happen, he mumbled. But it did, she said. The silence between them was suffocating. She stood up and walked to the cabinet, pulled down a cup, poured water, and set it in front of him. He didn't drink it. She loved you, she said, even when you didn't love her back. He looked at her, eyes red. I did love her. I didn't know how to show it. And by the time I figured it out, it was too late. No, she replied. You figured it out the moment someone else carried her heart. He stood up and took a step toward her, but she didn't move. You can't fix this, she said softly. Not with apologies. Not with flowers at her grave. Not with regret. Tears welled in his eyes. What do I do? She looked down at her chest, at the heartbeat that didn't belong to her. You live with it. She walks different now. Not all the time, but in moments. When she's standing by the window with a cup of tea. Or brushing her hair with a rhythm she swears isn't hers. When she hums a melody under her breath, and doesn't realize it's the lullaby my mother used to sing to me. I'm not haunting her. Not like that. I don't speak in her head. I don't whisper through the walls. I don't try to take anything from her. But sometimes a feeling slips through. A memory. A scent. A pause in her day that wasn't shaped by her life, but by mine. It's subtle. But it's there. The first time she visited my grave, she didn't say anything. Just stood quietly with a handful of lilies. She didn't cry. She didn't pray. She just looked down at the stone like she already knew me, like she'd known me for years. She left a folded note tucked between the flowers. It said, "I didn't ask for your heart, but I promise not to waste it." She keeps that promise. She reads more now, laughs slower, holds eye contact longer than she used to. She started painting again. Not for anyone, just for herself. Sometimes she dreams of my mother's garden, even though she's never been there. Sometimes she wakes up and smells vanilla, the kind I used to wear on Sundays. He doesn't come around much anymore. He tried for a while. Brought roses. Left messages. Sat on the front steps waiting to be forgiven. But she stopped answering. Not because I told her to. Because she knew. He didn't want a life with her. He wanted redemption. And that's not the same thing. She's building something different now. Quiet. Steady. A life that doesn't borrow from guilt or settle for survival. A life where she feels each beat with purpose. And sometimes, when she's alone and the world is still, she presses her palm to her chest and whispers, "Thank you." And in that space between her heartbeat and mine, I whisper back,